The Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing as far as the division of the soul and the spirit, of both joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. We believe all Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be adequate, equipped for every good work. The Bible tells us to be diligent, to present yourself approved unto God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. As always, we assemble together to fulfill the royal imperative of 2 Peter 3:18, to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. You see here before you this morning an excavation site that is near the Western Wall Plaza in Jerusalem. This is something that's ongoing in Israel, even with the trouble that they have now in Gaza and other places in the nation. Still, some things are being found. This is something that's, we've looked at some of these things before, but this is something that is taken from a legal excavation, and it's a seal. This is a seal. It's a clay seal stamp from the first temple period that's found in Jerusalem. Archaeologists have discovered a clay seal stamp from the first temple period during excavations in the Western Wall Plaza in Jerusalem. According to Dr. Wexler Dola, this is the first time that such a sealing has been found in a legal excavation. And it supports the biblical record of the existence of a governor in Jerusalem 2,700 years ago. The seal is not very big. It measures 13 by 14 millimeters and was made using fired lump clay. This is something that's a common material for seals made in that particular time. They were made of clay. They were formed and they were fired and made hard by the heat. And of course, some of these have survived, as you can see, over 3,000 years. Well, this is more evidence, of course, that Israel has a long history in the land. Well, the upper part of the seal depicts two figures in a facing position, while the back has an inscription written in ancient Hebrew script. The inscription reads, "Belonging to the governor of the city." The title, governor of the city, is known from the Bible and from extra biblical documents referring to an official appointed by the king. Governors of Jerusalem are mentioned twice in the Bible, technically 3 times. One is a duplicate of the other passage. And of course, that is governors of Jerusalem during the first temple period. Joshua is the governor of the city in the days of Hezekiah. And of course, if we take the opportunity, if you will, to, you can look in your Bible if you'd like to, and you could mark it if you feel so led to. But 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 8. 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 8. And we see here in verse 8, it says, "Then he brought all the priests from the cities of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Geba to Beersheba, and he broke down the high places of the gates, which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on one's left at the city gate." So you see the king here, of course, who is Hezekiah at the time, he's cleaning things up. He's getting everything right with the Lord. But at that particular time, you can see this man named Joshua, not the Joshua of the conquest, but another man named Joshua, is the governor of the city of Jerusalem. Also, there's a man named Ammon, who was the governor of the city in the days of Josiah. Josiah, of course, the king of Judah. We look at 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 18:25. Then the king of Israel said, "Take Micaiah and return him to Ammon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son." So you can see here, we have these two governors during the first temple period, governors of the city of Jerusalem. Well, this guy named Professor Taleh Oman of the Hebrew University and another professor named Benjamin Sass of Tel Aviv University, they describe the seal as follows. Two men face each other in a mirror-like manner above a double line. Their heads are depicted as large dots lacking details. The outward-facing hands are dropped down and the inward-facing hands are raised. All the figures wear striped, knee-length garments. The Israeli Antiquities Authority's archaeologists suggest that the seal was likely placed on an important missive or official dispatch, if you will. And it's, of course, serving as an indication of the governor's office. This is one of the things, that they would take and they would pour wax on a scroll or whatever they were trying to use as something to transfer information to somebody else. And then they would take their seal and they would stamp that wax, or they could use clay also. They would make an impression with this stamp, and that way they would know that this is an official document. This is something that even goes on today in certain places with certain people. People still use wax and seals and stamps. I know working for the government that sometimes we had to transmit information, and oftentimes it was something that was hand carried. Sometimes there was things that they didn't trust to be transferred by email or by telephone. So we put it in an envelope that they called a Holy Joe, not like our Joe back here in the back, but anyway, a Holy Joe. It was an envelope, and it had some holes in it. You could actually see some of the words on the document if it wasn't covered up properly. So you had to make sure that the documents were covered up properly. Then at the top, they had these two washer-like buttons at the top with a string on it. You'd wrap the string around both of those buttons like that and put a piece of tape across it, sign it, and date it. And if someone on the other end got it and that tape was removed or torn, something like that, they'd know that somebody had tampered with those documents. But anyway, we used a special kind of tape for that kind of thing. But when we think about these things, these discoveries are being made all over. Even in a time of war. The discovery, of course, was made in the northwestern part of the Western Wall Plaza from a strata dating to the First Temple period. That's the 7th to 6th centuries BC. According to a press release by the Israeli Antiquities Authorities, one of the several buildings exposed in this area was the likely destination of the missive and seal. They can usually tie something nearby to the excavation as an old government building or a palace or whatever the case might be. Previous excavations have found large assemblages of seals in the vicinity, suggesting that the buildings were inhabited by high-ranking officials involved in the governance of Jerusalem. So another discovery, if you will, as we go through time dealing with these particular findings, it tells us that what we believe is historically accurate, and it's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. We hear these things. One of the things, in the world today, we live in a cancel culture. We live in a culture where things are under attack. And of course, the most important things that are under attack in the world today of course, are God's divine institutions. You might say, well, I'm an individual and I'm often under attack in the angelic conflict. Well, that's because you represent these institutions as an ambassador for Christ. Of course, we talk about divine institution of volition. We find that in Genesis 2:19 and 3:6. We also talk about the divine institution of marriage, Genesis 2:22 through 25. And of course, this brings forth the one flesh principle that God intended for men and women to live by. Also, number 3, in Genesis 4:1 through 2:17 and 25, we have the divine institution of family. And of course, number 4 is nations that we find in Genesis chapter 10. These are things that are under attack these days. You see, the Jews in Israel, well, if the Palestinians had their way and Hezbollah had their way and all these other groups, they would no longer have a nation. They would be wiped off the face of the earth. But guess what? God's plan is for them to be there and to survive there, and nothing that anybody does in history going forward is going to remove them from that land. There's no way. Well, we talk about family. There's all kinds of things going on in the world today. People have identity crisis. This is something that's going on. You've probably seen some of the things in the news recently where a person who claimed that they were non-binary died. Yes, it's a sad thing, of course, when people die, especially when they don't know the truth. But as you know, there's all kinds of things that are changing and going crazy these days where people have all these different ideas. And if you mention something, they don't like your idea, they'll persecute you, they'll try and cancel you. Our rights as citizens of this country are also under attack. Your First Amendment right and your Second Amendment rights are under attack. The current administration that we have today, who members of that administration swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, have attacked the Constitution of the United States in an orchestrated effort. And of course, when it all comes down to it, if there's any way that people can, they'll violate your family, they'll violate your marriage, they'll violate your volition. And this is something that is orchestrated by none other than Satan himself and the SODs, the sons of disobedience. So it's a very important time in the angelic conflict to make sure that you're sober, alert, awake, pursuing God's plan. He knows better than all the rest of them do. Yes, we live in what we call the devil's world, but it's our opportunity to represent and expand the royal family of God. That's the way it is. And of course, when we talk about all these violations and things that are going on as believers in Jesus Christ, there's things that we need to be thinking about too. Dealing with people in the world, dealing with ourselves, dealing with our families, other believers. And of course, as Christians, we're hybrid beings. We have things that we can do, choices that we can make that unbelievers don't have available to them. We have volition. We're not slaves to our sin nature, you see. And of course, there's unbelievers out there that have good norms and standards. They follow establishment principles, but they don't have a relationship with God like we do. Yes, we've got something they don't have, as much as they'd like to say they've got it all. Well, we talk about higher forms of doctrine and things like that. One of the most important things, especially in the cancel culture that we live in today, is the higher principles of forgiveness. Something that a lot of people won't do today. You say something that somebody doesn't like, there's no forgiveness. What are they going to do? What can they do to persecute you? What can they do to cancel you? You see? Well, one of these days we're gonna wake up and we're gonna see the merger of some of these social media things out there, and hopefully it'll take place before long. But we're going to see things like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter merged together, and you're going to have Twitface. But anyway, that may be the best thing that happens to us. Twitface. But unlike all other organs of the body, our minds, our memories, have no system for getting rid of waste. Sometimes there's things that are stuck in our minds that may not necessarily be fruitful or productive. And of course, when we talk about people getting offended or getting hurt, well, hurt or offenses can pile up in your mind, like open files or black holes. And of course, gratitude for what is right, compassion for suffering, and accepting imperfections and focusing on life's higher meaning can soften those hurts in life. But there's one cure that can dissolve all those hurts in a good way, and that's forgiveness. Now you think about forgiveness. Forgiveness, of course, is a voluntary choice. I watched a movie here not too long ago. I don't even remember what it was now. But somebody was on there and they said, and you did this, and it's unforgivable. I thought, well, this character must not be a believer. But it is a voluntary choice. It means that you choose to give up anger, resentment, grudges, despite knowing and accepting that some kind of misconduct has happened. Forgiveness is choosing the higher path and leading a more thoughtful life driven by higher principles. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as believers? Huh? Don't be mistaken for Miller High Life, but we're talking about Christian high life, living by higher principles. And everybody's got a sin nature, but we all have choices to make every day. There's there's meaning in forgiveness. Anger, holding a grudge, and hostility can all lead to anxiety, depression, irritability, disturbed sleep, high blood pressure, irregular heart rhythm, and a higher risk for heart attack. I've looked all this stuff up, at reputable websites, places like Mayo Clinic, John Hopkins hospitals. Forgiveness, on the other hand, has many benefits. By forgiving, you can enjoy improved health, save energy, save worry, save anxiety. You can have better relationships, and you can set an example for others, particularly for children who are under attack in the school system these days and have been for quite some time. Indoctrination with all kinds of satanic viewpoint. But anyway, here's some of the benefits of forgiveness. Forgiveness can enhance physical health. It can improve blood pressure, lower heart rate, and improve immunity. There's medical studies that show these results to be true. Forgiveness can improve mental and emotional health by promoting better sleep, lowering anxiety, lowering depression, and lowering stress levels. Forgiveness can improve your relationships. Forgiveness can help you save energy, help you focus better, help you feel good about yourself and others. Forgiveness can make you happier. Now, of course, you think about forgiveness as believers, and a lot of us say, well, I've been a Bible doctor for years. You can't tell me nothing about forgiveness. Who do you think you are? When we talk about applying forgiveness, it doesn't come naturally to the human mind, to the human being, to who we are. It's not easy. Forgiveness is as intentional as exercising. You have to make a choice to do it. Because planning revenge activates your sin nature's pleasure centers. You have to make a considerable effort to forgive. Yeah. I remember talking to a guy one time, and we were talking about the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. He said, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, revenge. I said, wait a minute. Of course, he was joking, but revenge activates your sin nature's pleasure centers. Well, to forgive, you must learn and apply these four principles. Well, you have to find the true meaning in the ability to forgive. You know how you do that? You forgive somebody. But you have to find the true meaning in the ability to forgive. You must become a more effective person as a forgiver. You can become a more effective person. That's what we're supposed to be as believers, a more effective, more productive person than all the unbelievers running around out there. And of course, one thing that's difficult is you have to find all people to be forgivable. Not like that person I was talking about in that movie. That's unforgivable. Well, you have to be able to find everybody to be forgivable. Well, I can forgive you, but I can't forgive you. I can forgive you, but not you. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You have to find that you can forgive everybody. What a wonderful world it would be if people could voice their own opinion, regardless of what it was, and understand that we all have the right to do that. And if you didn't agree with them, well, you could say, we can agree to disagree, and we can agree to forgive. The fourth principle, which is another hard one, is to forgive yourself for your failure to forgive others. Of course, forgiveness is the ultimate test of your ability to apply the higher principles of forgiveness. The hurt and pain of unforgiveness originates from human failures in gratitude, in compassion, in acceptance, and the application of higher learning, That's what we talk about Bible doctrine. We talk about divine viewpoint. This is higher learning. Yes, we have to be able to learn it. We have to be able to apply it. We know that we learn and apply Bible doctrine when we're in fellowship. Well, we gain SG3. And God can bless us in time if He wants to. But the more effectively that you can practice the 4 principles of forgiveness, the easier it will be to forgive. Find true meaning in the ability to forgive. Become a more effective person as a forgiver. Find all people to be forgivable. Forgive yourself for your failure to forgive others. Anyway, now that we can hear a pin drop, Zechariah's 6th vision. Zechariah's 6th vision, chapter 5. We're starting out with the first few verses. We just finished off the 5th vision, the summary of that vision. And it was quite revealing to see some of the stuff that was going to happen in the near future for the people in Judah back at the time of Zechariah's prophecy. Well, in the 6th vision, he says, "Then I turned, and I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a flying scroll." I seen one of those the other day. No, I know I didn't. I'm just kidding. I've never seen a flying scroll. And it seems like Zechariah had never seen one either. But he's seen a flying scroll. And a speaking angel, he's close to him, and he said to me, according to Zechariah, "What do you see?" And I answered, "I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits, and its width 10 cubits. This is a pretty big scroll. Bigger than anything I've ever seen before. And in verse 3, then the speaking angel, he said to me, Zechariah says, well, he said to me, this is the curse that is going forth over the face of the whole land. Surely everyone who steals will be purged away according to the writing on one side, and everyone who swears will be purged away according to the writing on the other side. So this scroll represents a curse, and the curse is written on both sides of this scroll. Well, that verbiage and vocabulary there may be a little bit different from what you have in your Bible, depending on what version you just happen to be using. And I know in the New American Standard it reads a little bit different, but there's some things that they just conveniently left out. There's some things that even though some words are used a bunch of times, there are some occasions where translators have just used them to say, well, they're just repeating the action, and we'll just translate it like an adverb. Well, there's some things that happened here. We want to make sure that we bring out those details. Zechariah chapter 5 and verse 1, looking at the Hebrew, we begin with Wa'ashub, which is the while conjunction here, and it's used temporally, translated as then. Plus we have ashu, which is the cal imperfect first person singular of the verb shu, which means to turn back or return, you see. So we know it can also mean to just simply to turn. So Zechariah turned. We don't know if he turned left or he turned right or if he used a signal. But he turned. That's followed by we'asa, which is the wow conjunction here, translated and, plus the cal imperfect first person singular of the verb nasa, which means to lift up or carry or take. And he says, then I turned and I lifted up. What did he lift up? Well, we have it, ayine, the masculine dual construct of the noun, of course, ayin, which is eyes. So we have the eyes of plus the first person singular suffix represented by the yod at the end of the word of me or my. So he lifted up the eyes of me. He lifted up my eyes. That's followed by wa'erea, which is the wow conjunction here again, translated and, plus the cal imperfect first person singular of the verb ra'ah, which means to see or look at. And he says, and I began to look. And of course, these are all consecutive forms of the verb here, indicating more events in a consecutive episode of the visions that he had, of course, on the 24th of Shabbat, during the twilight hours of that day. That's followed by Wehinna, and of course this is emphatic here. Translated, they have the wow conjunction translated and plus hinna, which is the interjection to or lo or behold. So he says, and behold. That's followed by Megillah, not the gorilla. And the feminine singular noun here, which is a roll or writing, or a roll of writing, or a scroll, if you will. That's followed by afah, which is the cal feminine singular participle of the verb woof, which means to fly. So in a participle form there, it means flying, and we have a scroll, a flying one. A scroll, a flying one, or a flying scroll. In verse 2, we have Weomer, which we've seen before several times, translated and. We have the cal imperfect third person masculine singular of the verb amar, to speak or say, and he said, the speaking angel, ele, preposition el, to, followed by the first person singular suffix me, so he said to me. We have ma, the interrogative pronoun here, asking the question, what do? And that's followed by ata, which is the second person masculine singular of the personal pronoun here, which is intensive form here, placing emphasis on what's being said. And so we have, what do you yourself? What do you? Followed by roe, the cal masculine singular participle of the verb ra'ah, to see or seeing. He says, what are you yourself seeing? Now you think, here's Zechariah. He's got this speaking angel right beside him, and it makes you wonder, does the speaking angel see what he's seeing at that time? Or is he asking this question because he's not sure what Zechariah is looking at? But he wants Zechariah to pay attention. And behold, this draws attention to what he's seeing. That's followed by Weomer, with wow conjunction, translated and, plus the cal imperfect first person masculine singular, the verb amar, to speak or say, and I said. That's followed by ani, which is the first person singular personal pronoun. Again, of course, this is emphatic. He says, I or me, myself, I myself, followed by the roeh, the cal masculine singular participle of verb ra'ah, to see or seeing. He says, I myself am seeing Megillah, the feminine singular noun, a roll of writing or scroll, followed by apa, the cow feminine singular participle of the verb woof, to fly or flying, a scroll, a flying one, a flying scroll. He said, I am seeing a flying scroll. And that's followed by a rekha, he, the masculine singular construct of the noun, which means length. He says, in this construct form, he says the length of plus he, the third person feminine singular suffix, literally the length of her because scroll is a feminine noun. The length of it, or its length, is eserim, the masculine plural cardinal noun, the number 10. Since it's a plural, it means 20. That's followed by ba'ama, with bath preposition here, in, with, or by, plus ha, the article, translated the, plus the feminine singular noun ama, a cubit. Ama actually means something else, but it's translated as a cubit. And that's followed by werakebahi. That's the wow conjunction, of course, translated as and, plus the masculine singular construct of the noun rokab, which means width in the construct form, the width of. So we have and the width of he, followed by he there, the third person feminine singular her, literally and the width of her, and its width is eser, which is the feminine singular cardinal number 10. That's followed by ba'ama, the bath preposition here, translated in, with, or by, plus the ha article again, and translated the, we have a feminine singular noun, ama, again, a cubit. By the cubit, the length is 20 cubits, and the width is 10 cubits. Exposition point 1, Zechariah chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. The fifth chapter of this record of prophetic events that took place during the twilight hours of the 24th of Shavat, 520 BC, Zechariah sees a different vision that features an unusual image moving through the air. Point 2, just before he sees this amazing vision, Zechariah's written record reveals that he engaged himself in some small physical movements, but did not note any change of his location. Point 3, with no information that provided a geographical change, Zechariah must be outside of the city of Jerusalem, near the ravine, where he had seen a man riding a red horse and standing among some myrtle trees in his first vision. And you remember that back from chapter 1 and verse 8. And of course he also saw some red, white, and sorrel horses. Point 4, Zechariah grammatically connected the fifth and sixth visions as consecutive prophetic episodes by using the wa conjunction with a cal imperfect form of a verb, wa-ashub, which 21 out of 54 English versions rendered, then I turned. So you have a little bit less than half of the translators that are out there in the 54 versions, English versions I have available to my study. Less than half of them noted that. The other half said, maybe don't worry about that. You know, there's important things that happen sometimes. We don't always know what the reason for them is. But for some reason, he turned. And, you know, I can remember things in my past where people turned. Slowly I turned. Step by step. Inch by inch. Niagara Falls. Some of you remember that. Some of you going, has he gone nuts? Well, Point 5, in its basic sense, the verb shuv is used of movement, the shifting of direction in a particular way, and then shifting back from it in the opposite way, which gives you the idea of return. But it can also function to repeat the action of the main verb, translated as then, and whatever the verb is, and again, and then whatever the next verb is. And that's what a lot of these translators have done, the majority of translators have done. They said, well, basically he said, then I lifted up my eyes again and looked. They didn't say anything about him turning. I guess they thought it was unimportant. Point 6, the record of the sixth vision begins with the introductory clauses that Zechariah used previously in this book. And that is, Wa'esa, Ayine, Wa'era, Wahina. Translated by the New American Standard, then I lifted up my eyes again and looked, and behold. And of course there's a couple references there, 1:18 and 2:1. And that's what he said, except for the word again. He said, then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, drawing attention to what he saw. Point 7, the difference in our verse is the leading verb shuv, to turn or return, that occurs in various forms 1,073 times in the Old Testament Hebrew text. However, some English scholars translate it as an adverb about 120 times. They just translate it as again. Point 8 is one of the small movements Zechariah made just before he began to see the next vision. He turned, then he lifted up his eyes, then he began to look at the images or image in the vision. Point 9, surprised and amazed by what he saw, Zechariah used the while conjunction and demonstrative interjection, wahina, translated and behold, which emphatically directed attention to the object on which he focused his eyes. And of course he used that wahina and behold in 2:1, 2:3, and 4:2. It's something we often see those in several versions. I can remember years ago when I became a believer, and I was reading a King James Version, and it said, and lo. And sometimes I kind of duck my head a little bit. And lo. What are we seeing here? And lo. Point 10, this is the third out of 5 times that Zechariah has employed this similar vocabulary to introduce a new vision from the Lord of hosts, in which he used his eyes to perceive divine revelation. This is divine revelation, nothing short of it. Now he's got to figure out what it means, right? If you see something out of the ordinary, you may want to consider it as divine revelation. And some people might say, well, are you okay? Are you running a fever? Point 11, in his narrative, Zechariah quickly described the object that he was seeing with a feminine singular noun that was modified by a count participle, magilapa. Literally translated a scroll, a flying one. That's how it would read in the Hebrew. Point 12, the Hebrew anarthrous noun, that means it does not have an article. Megillah, translated scroll, is a cognate of the verb galau, which in a literal sense simply means to roll. And what do you do with the scroll? Well, they call it a scroll because it's something that's rolled up. You know, the closest thing that we deal with these days that's like that oftentimes is like a blueprint or a plan of some type, a work statement, or maybe a roll of wrapping paper. We roll them up. But it simply means a roll. Let's look at Genesis 29. When we talk about roll, well, roll can come in several ways, if you will. Genesis 29 and verse 3. Well, of course, roll is a movement, if you will. Genesis 29:3, we've got the man Jacob here. It says, when all the flocks were gathered there, at the well, that is, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. So they used this stone to protect the well, to keep from getting bad things in it, or falling in it, if you will. But they would roll the stone off the mouth. Obviously, this is an action you can see and understand pretty simply. Point 13, by definition, a scroll is a roll of papyrus, parchment, paper, or leather on which a message or some kind of information has been written. We looked at Jeremiah chapter 36. One of our major prophets, Jeremiah chapter 36 and verse 2. And here's Jeremiah's orders. Take a scroll and write on it all the words which I have spoken to you concerning Israel and concerning Judah, and concerning all the nations from the day I first spoke to you, from the days of Josiah, even to this day. And you would have to hope that that's a long scroll, because God had a lot to say to Jeremiah. And when you look at the book of Daniel and you see that he was reading Jeremiah, evidently he had a scroll that he was reading from. That was the common form used in those days. Point 14, in ancient times, writings were rolled around a straight stick or cylinder and were recognized as a scroll, the common form for a book or a document. And, of course, that little definition comes to us from Easton's Bible Dictionary. Point 15, scrolls were used by all kinds of people for many centuries. However, many scholars believe that the use of scrolls originated in the Eastern Mediterranean ancient Egyptian civilizations. Yeah, some of those hieroglyphics that were on the caves, well, they eventually put those on scrolls. Hieroglyphics found in the tombs, in the pyramids, they put them on scrolls. Point 16, before the codex or bound books with pages were invented in the first century, the use of scrolls was a common and editable way to record and preserve information for repeated use. They did it so that somebody could look at it later. It was for posterity, if you will. Let's look at Isaiah chapter 30. Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 8. Isaiah chapter 30 and verse 8. And here's Isaiah's orders. Now go, write it on a tablet before them, and inscribe it on a scroll, that it may serve in the time to come as a witness forever. That's the way it was. And let's take a break, and we'll pick up at point 17 in about 15 to 20 minutes.